Hello, welcome to the Renaissance Women. Today, I wanted to see how many Benincosas we could fit into a frame. And
3.
a dog. 4. Fitzwilliam Benincosa. Anyways, today we are here. We have been talking about the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and today we are going to talk about our spiritual awakenings. We have all had very lengthy, hard, stressful journeys to get to where we are today, and we are just getting started. Our journey is just beginning because remember, it's never the destination, it's always the journey. So, Darcy, let's start with you because your story is pretty damn good.
Because I'm the eldest.
Because she's the elder who looks the youngest, but that's okay. We're not upset about it at all. I would love to know. So Darcy, our whole family grew up Mormon, and Brooke was not very Mormon, but it's okay.
Brooke came out of the womb saying no to organized religion.
Hard no.
Hard no.
She was very advanced for her age.
She was. So Darcy went to BYU and was very Mormon, very spiritual. Would you say you were spiritual when you were Mormon?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And why don't you go ahead and share your spiritual path with
So I think a person's spiritual path is really interesting. And sometimes I have gotten caught up in the fact that mine took so long. I was a 30-year-old virgin Mormon woman.
Those don't exist.
We're
could sell that online
unicorns.
for much money, except for not anymore, because we're going to crush that. We're going to shut that down that even exists.
And so as I had my awakening, I had to reconcile with this awakening that I had allowed a religion to be completely in control of my sexuality. And I feel that this is still something that women are doing today. There is this virginity cult where our virginity is prized. And when you talk of the word virgin, you never are thinking of a man, even though men are virgins as well. You're always thinking of that like woman, and you think of fairy tales, and you
Purity.
think of, different movies where they would take the blood of a virgin, or the virgin is the most pure. And so there is this
Or if
idea,
you lost your virginity, you were worthless and no one would marry you.
And you were tainted by the devil, and you would have devil worshiping if you were not a virgin.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That's
just
the
a
way I think.
really interesting concept, all the fear, all the evil, all the good that comes from someone else being in control of your sexuality. And I really had to, when I had my awakening, it was also an awakening of reclaiming my body and getting rid of all the negativity that came from, in Mormonism, there are quote after quote that they'd rather a woman die than lose her purity. In the Bible, it's the same thing. Any woman who had any sense of control of who she was a harlot. We don't have hardly any women of the past that are amazing examples of being a fully reclaimed woman, a woman of her own self, a woman in control of her own body. And because most of those stories have been buried by the patriarchy. We used to have, way back as we've all been researching the goddess, the awakening, the goddess used to be this sensual, beautiful woman who had in touch with her powers, her healing powers, her intuitive powers, her intelligent powers, on par with any man. But because men have written history, and because patriarchy has
and destroyed history and rewrote history.
Patriarchy has really played a key in us being so in our own little space of self-judgment. So I think the first part of an awakening, and maybe we can all speak to this, is this idea of learning how to stop the self-judgment, because religion teaches you to judge yourself for every little thought you think, every little thing you do. You're constantly weighing your actions on if you're going to get into heaven. At least, well, I think most religions deal with a heaven or a hell in some capacity. So yeah, how have you guys with judgment, like when you were leaving religion, did you have a sense of a period of time where you were judging your actions? Like I remember right after I left religion and had sex, I got in a car accident the next week. And it really was hard for me not to think that God had done that to me because I had sinned. And I think reclaiming yourself from this idea of a man in the sky weighing every single thing you do, instead of having this beautiful, complete expression of a human being, is something we're just starting to come out of as organized religion is looking a little different these days.
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting in my recent research of the actual translation of the word virgin, it's with the virgin maiden, the enchantress, the mother, the crone. Virgin actually means a woman in her own right. It has nothing to do with sexuality, or losing your virginity.
Sexuality.
So, yes, that word. I don't know why that was so hard for me to get out. But I do think that's interesting, is the word that has been so shamed of like losing your virginity. Actually, Virgin Mary, the Virgin Maiden, means a woman in her own right, in charge of her own body and everything like that. So I do find that very interesting.
Well, and that goes back to the connotation and denotations of words. The connotation is what we've come to understand. The denotation is the dictionary definition. And so many people have, so obviously, whose is that, yours?
Good turn
off. Yeah,
we're super profesh.
The dictionary.
This is not our first time.
One day we'll have more than one microphone. We're virgins at podcasting.
Yeah.
Well, are we though? Women in their own right. Yes.
For me, myself, I didn't ever have a hard time with my sexuality piece. I lost my virginity to my best friend, and it was very matter of fact it was something that I did feel ashamed that I was still a virgin, because at that time all of my friends were like, "You're still a virgin?
How old
You're
were you?
Still a virgin?"
21?
I was 21.
Were you a baby?
I know.
Nobody was 30? Okay.
She was a little different. But it was kind of just something that like I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it with someone who wasn't a super big douchebag. And so I was like, "Hey, will you take..."
I thought you were gonna say super big something else, but okay. Because we know he wasn't. No, just kidding. This is not about
he turned out later to be a super big douchebag, but that's okay. But not at the time that I lost my virginity. And so it was very matter of fact, like, "Hey, I want to lose my virginity. Will you take it?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay." Like, so it was just more like school on Wednesday nights.
Like, I think that's even an interesting concept. That's something I had to think a lot about is it something you lose? And is it something a man can take? Because since I was so much older, I decided a man wasn't going to take my virginity, and that I was going to be super bold, I was going to get rid of my hymen myself. And so I got these sizers from the doctor because I didn't want to go through this thing where the man, you know, in sex novels and everything, it's like the man will not make you a virgin anymore, and he's going to rip through your hymen membrane, and you might bleed, and it's going to be painful, and you need to like hold the pain. And I was like, no, I am in my 30s. No man is taking this from me. This is not a thing to be taken. I sort of got rid of this idea that I was a better, more pure person because I hadn't had sex. And I really had to work through that idea. And so, you know, you being younger, it was this concept of like, oh, will you take this from me? So even in virginity, we've bought into this belief that it's something a man can take. And it gets really complicated when you start to think about gay people, same-sex marriage. It's like, well, what does it really mean to lose your virginity then? You know, if you're not having, is it only the act of penetration? Like, what is it? And there's not really a great definition, which is why when Brooke talks about that not even being the real definition, that's why it gets so complicated.
So how does it have to do with your spiritual awakening?
I don't know. I think this podcast should be about virginity.
Kind of just hijacked it there.
I think that virginity is a big part of the spiritual awakening.
I think we should just
especially
talk
for
about how
Darcy,
we
too,
lost
though.
our virgin. I think we should just talk about sexuality. I don't know.
Sexuality is a big part of spirituality because it is creative energy, and you're starting to release that creative energy in a different way. So where you went out of your way to take it yourself, you're awakening your own creativity in a way.
So how did you go from being Mormon to losing your virginity on Match.com?
Thank you, Match.com, forever and ever.
I mean, you lost it yourself with the sizer, and then
I did. So the internet, there started to become what I call truth rooms where truth was spoken. And I started reading voraciously and realizing every religion lies and every religion paints their history in a way they want it to be painted. The interesting thing about the Mormon religion is it's a baby in comparison to Catholicism,
Hinduism, Judaism,
and all these other religions. Mormonism is only a 200-year-old religion instead of being like a 2,000-year-old religion. So with a 2,000-year-old religion, there's a lot of weird stuff too. People think Mormonism is so weird. It's just recent and we're not used to the weirdness. And so there is a lot of lies that were told within Mormonism. There was a lot of things hidden about Joseph Smith, which some people have now said that they think he created the Book of Mormon while on mushrooms.
Yep.
He was just having psychedelic experiences, which we could say for a whole other
like 10 podcasts.
There's so much to talk about.
Spiritual awakening. Mushrooms.
So I got onto a website called Feminist Mormon Housewives, and I started to go through a feminist awakening. My feminist awakening coincided with my spiritual awakening. And I feel like most women at some point go through some space of realizing that they have been set up as second-class citizens, that the workload is imbalanced in a lot of ways, that they don't, one of the things for me, I didn't get married in the Mormon church, and thus they had no idea what to do with me. There is no good answer for what happens to you in heaven if you're not married in the Mormon church, except for like, just wait. And if you're just faithful your whole life and you never have sex and you just stay Mormon and you stay really good, you'll get a husband in heaven. And when I really thought that through, I thought, this is the same thing they teach terrorists. Just go, lose your life, bomb things, fly into the Twin Towers, and you will get 100 virgins in heaven. I was being promised the same thing that when it all comes down to it, none of us really know if religion is true or not. None of us really know what heaven looks like. We think we can know because our religion has told us, but you really don't. It is a faith game. That's what religion is. It's a game of faith. And I realized that I was not willing to go the rest of my life without my divine self-expression and awakening just for the promise of marrying a Nephite in heaven. If you don't know Nephites, it's from the Book of Mormon. So
also, even
that was the beginning.
The beginning of religion is that God, who's a man, created Jesus, who is his son, to come down and be the savior, who's a man, created Adam, who's a man, and then they didn't want Adam to be lonely. So from Adam, they created Adam, a companion. So really Eve, who is also the fall, who ate the forbidden fruit, created to be a companion to Adam. So even just from the essential beginnings of Christianity, it's already set up with patriarchy, with women being a companion to the man.
Yeah.
And being made from
Boo!
No. I am my own rim.
I give that no stars. Bad story. I don't want that creation story. I reject it. No, Brooke, it's your turn.
About what?
Your spiritual awakening.
Well, I think
Lean closer.
We can start. My spiritual awakening was was probably pretty more harsh as I was younger. As you guys said, like I never grew up believing or feeling that religion was right. I remember getting baptized at 8 and be like, why is this happening? Like, this feels so weird. Like, it did not feel like my jam at all. And since we are talking about losing virginity, I think that was a big part of my spiritual awakening. And I was raped at 14 multiple times throughout those next few years throughout my life. And I always had a lot of guilt and shame towards it because of what like religious teachings had taught me. And it hasn't been until recently how like I always thought like, I'm okay. Like I never wanted to play the victim of what happened to me until like a couple of years ago when I was just like, I broke down. And I remember calling Darcy and I was like, I'm not okay. Like I saw his face as a friend request or something on Facebook. I'm like, oh, nope, never dealt with that trauma. And now I'm realizing that those things did happen to me so I can have a deeper sense of myself and my power to be able to help other people and to relate to people in different ways. But it really is crazy that I blamed myself for that. Mm-hmm. I thought it was my fault. I was 14. I always was like, well, it was my fault. Like I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have worn that. All the things that men tell you, like, you shouldn't have worn that if you didn't want this. And like, and it goes to a lot about consent and like a yes is a yes and a no is a no. And we do not teach our sons, our daughters these things. And that is a very important part of like smashing the patriarchy. Like, it doesn't matter what you are. It doesn't matter where you are. Like consent and integrity is something that we need to ingrain into our children, into our men, into our women, and everything about that. So I had like a really different upbringing with you guys than that. And then it really did free me in a way of my sexuality at a young age. Like I've always felt very comfortable with sexuality, and now that I have gotten over the guilt and shame, it has like totally empowered me in a different way of like this goddess being that I am turning out to be.
Yes, you are.
We will side note, we have to do a video just on orgasms because Brooke has learned how to orgasm just from energy.
It's true.
Alfie's impressed.
He's amazed. He's like, what? Teach me more.
Oh, Alfie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really, thank you for sharing that, Brooke. I find it so interesting, the opposite ends of the spectrum that, you know, two sisters can be with that. It really is like
and I was just
extreme middle kind of ground here. And it has all led us though to the same place of empowerment in our own divine potential.
Yeah, because I think when I left the church, I didn't want anything to do with anything spiritual or religious. I hated the word God. I just rejected it all. And then I went through this like really wild time in my life of just partying and exploring and making really bad decisions. But I was just like, fuck you, God. Like, it's not your fault. I won't feel any guilt. I won't feel any shame. And then, you know, it started to feel very empty and very unfulfilling. And there was something inside of me that wanted more, but I still rejected it. And it was actually Brooke, when she went through her 12 steps program or codependency program, they tell you that you have to believe in a higher power. And so I could only call it the universe forever. I was just like, okay, my higher power is the universe. And that's what I'll believe in. And then it kind of went to like goddess, like I can say goddess. And now I just don't mind if it's God or goddess, because I believe God's gender neutral. Yeah, there's no sex. Like once you get closer to unity, because even male and female creates separation with the divine. And so like as we get closer to like the oneness, it doesn't matter what it is. But now I'm totally comfortable in like believing and praying to God. And I actually started praying again for the first time in 20 years because also of Brooke, our little crazy wise sister.
I know. The one who is least religious is the one who prays.
Yeah. She's like, you guys, we have to say a prayer for our food and like honor and bless the animal that sacrificed its life. And we do it in such a different way than like, you know, that was kind of the hard thing too with being Mormon. It's just so rehearsed. Like every fast and testimony meeting, I could go to any church and I could mimic verbatim. I know that this church is true. Like literally.
Maybe explain what a fast and testimony meeting is.
Once a month you fast and you fast to donate money. You give up food to help feed the hungry. So
which is a great
idea of it is really great. And I love and honor that. but there's not like a lot of intention or ritual with it. Like you don't even know why you're doing it when you're young. You're just like, I'm freaking hungry. Like feed me. I want 2 pieces of bread.
Our parents maybe needed to teach us that.
But I mean, even in church, like I don't feel like every Sunday they were like, today we're fasting because we're giving this money to this and we're honoring this. Like, I just don't feel like, I feel like everything's rehearsed and everything is mechanical. And so even on
programmed.
Yeah. On Sundays, you bury your testimony of the church, and your parents teach you how to do this at a young age. So you memorize it, and everyone gives basically the same testimony, except for those 1 or 2 people that go off forever and have to like get cut off. Sit down, taking too long. But it just didn't really seem intentional. There wasn't awareness with being in that religion. Everything's from a book. Everything's like just rehearsed. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. So this is what you do. Yeah.
Well, I think what can be tricky about our awakening is, excuse me, in religion, there's not a lot of room for evolution. There's not a lot of room for change. And like the worst kind of marriage to be in, I'm a wedding photographer. I've seen a lot of wedding ceremonies. I've been in lots of churches, lots of different cultures, seen every culture's definition of doing this wedding. And the best one I ever went to was on the beach in the Dominican Republic. And they were getting married. And he said, look at your future husband, look at your future wife, and realize that tomorrow they are not going to be the same person. And the only way you'll survive in this marriage is if you allow them to change. And what religion doesn't allow for is change and evolution. Religion allows for the same scriptures, the same, and you can give the argument of, well, I interpret them different every year. And yes, I understand that. But when there's not an allowance of more of evolution, so many of these religions were created so long ago, they really leave out the world around them and the changes around them, So yeah, I think that the best kind of spirituality is one that lets you evolve as a full human being in all the ways that you get to evolve.
Yeah, I really loved that with stepping out of this tiny box. And I think that's a lot of things with patriarchy too. Like, they put men in this little box, they put women in this little box, they put religion in this little box. Black people are in this box, these people are this, poor people are in this box. Like, everyone's in this little box, and they have this little roles, and this is how they're supposed to do. Dogs in this box.
Am I in a box?
You are totally in a box.
You are. You just get to live in this house.
But like, now that we've got to expand our spiritual practice, I love to call on like Hindu goddesses like Kali, and I love to like Kuan Yin, who is like the divine mother. And I love to incorporate Buddhist practices and the Greek mythology characters, and just all of these different, like yoga as part of it, meditation as part of it. And just really what I've found through my spiritual journey is this different level of awareness in everything that I do, awareness and intention. So instead of just going through being like, I got to kneel down and say my prayers, and I say my prayers the same way, and I rehearse them like, please think this and blah, blah, blah. And, you're just in this mechanical wheel, and getting out of that and be like, ooh, tonight I'm going to pray to this goddess, and tonight I'm going to pray to that goddess. And I'm going to, have my gratitude practice look different every time. Like, oh, I'm going to see gratitude in the mirror. I'm going to see gratitude to a friend. I'm going to see gratitude and tap my heart and breathe into my heart. Like, I do it different every time because it's getting in different cells of my body. I feel like, sadly, religion's very much in your head. And it's very much like, you read these scriptures, you're talked to like this is how you're trained to be. So you're just like all in your head. It's very rarely like in your body, and you feel it in your heart and your soul and your spirit. It's like religion, just for me, wasn't spiritual at all.
Well, religion is only parts of the truth. If people would realize they all mean the same thing, and they're just parts. And different parts of the truth.
We were recently doing a spiritual kind of
We did ayahuasca.
Okay.
Say it. We did it in Costa Rica where it's legal.
While we were doing ayahuasca, our shaman told us that each one of us contains a piece of the truth. and that the truth that lies in April and the truth that lies in me and the truth that lies in Brooke, when we share that truth, we have a fuller truth. So it goes back to what you're saying, April, with like praying to different people or calling in different energies or different experiences. It's like, imagine, we'll just take Mormonism since that's the religion we grew up with. Imagine Mormonism is like Iron Man, and you just use Iron Man the whole time. You know, there's nothing wrong with Iron Man. He had 3 movies just for him. But then the world and having this world experience is like Thor and the Hulk.
Yeah.
And all of it. It's like a whole Avengers team when you can sort of open up and see the truth that lies within each person. And that's where the oneness comes. And that's where we stop being so so divided. I remember having friendships, I'm sure you all did, like if you weren't a Mormon, we were more skeptical and we weren't as close. Like we didn't keep our guard, we kept our guard up more. You know, it's like if somebody's not the same
unless
religion,
we were trying to convert you.
We were really,
we were like really good friends.
Really good at converting people. Sorry, everybody. I need to make a public apology for my Mormon missionary days. I was very convincing, but yeah, it's like anything that causes a division, I don't think is in service of our highest spiritual path.
We're not bashing on religion. Religion serves, honestly, I'm really glad I grew up Mormon. Like it, for a lot of things that it's taught me now, but like, I really love that they are so family oriented and that they
teach tithing. Like
they teach
really
tithing, the law of tithing and like saving 10% of your income and giving it to other people. And then the fast Sundays, like fast. And there's a lot of service acts involved. So I really feel like, and our parents are still Mormon.
And our parents, they're the happiest being in an organized religion. It's where you find your happiness. And that's the most important point, is where you feel you can grow and evolve as much as a person, and just realizing that for everybody, it looks differently.
And just making that conscious decision for yourself, I think is really important, because we were all just going to be Mormon because we grew up Mormon and our parents were Mormon and their parents were Mormon. And that's just what we did. We were just Mormon. And kind of like we grew up in patriarchy in Utah and in the United States. So like we have certain beliefs that like we just have and believe because that's just how we've always been. And then there comes a point in your life where you have to like, you know, even with divine feminine, like, do I like to wear makeup? Am I wearing makeup because of the patriarchy? Do I like to wear it for me? Like, so I stopped wearing it for a long time and was like,
stop shaving.
Yeah. I'm not shaving my legs ever again. Sorry, Spencer.
Brooke's armpit hair. 10 out of 10
She
stars.
gives no fucks about it.
Well, and I know we don't want to offend anybody who's religious, but I also don't want to excuse it. Religion has caused a lot of issues. And the biggest one is lack of divine feminine, especially in Christian-based religions. There is the God, the Son, the Holy Ghost. I even think people with the Holy Ghost see it as more of a masculine spirit. I always did.
Yeah.
And that just cuts women off from their divine. And I remember going and studying in Brazil, and we studied with the Candomblé religion in Brazil, and that is a religion run by women. And they didn't just have one god, they had 7. And 3 or 4 of those gods were feminine. And when you're little, they help you find your like patron god or goddess that is like the one that's most you, like the priestess like studies the priestess studies you as a person, because her tribe is small, and then as she watches you grow up, she'll tell you this is your patron god or goddess. You can still pray to all the others, but this one's like your teammate. And we were a group of 30, and the priestess was sitting on her throne. Yes, a beautiful grass woven throne. And one girl asked, well, can you see in this group that you see, can you see our goddess in any of us? And she said, I see it in 3 of you. And immediately I knew I was one of the people, because I saw her look at me. I was like, oh, it's me. And this is right before I was leaving Mormonism. So she pointed to a gentleman and said his, and she pointed to a girl and said hers. And then she looks at me and she goes, and yours is very strong. And yours is the goddess Imanjah, which is the goddess of the ocean and nurturing and motherhood. And she went and she gave me this identity of this goddess. And this is where I was just starting to go through this questioning of Mormonism and not feeling fulfilled. And where do I go from here? And giving me that goddess, like I went home and I studied her and I just started to feel this awakening of, oh my gosh, there is a feminine divine I can connect to. And this woman is like, this goddess was just like sexy and dancing and commanded the ocean and super fun. Like, and I just started going down that hole of studying the divine feminine. And that is where I feel the Christian religions have done a disservice to women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's sad that we have lost all the teachings of Mary Magdalena and that she has been completely almost washed out of the Bible or misinterpreted in so many ways because she was Jesus's like right-hand man. Like he trusted her more than all the other 12 apostles.
Yeah.
And that is such a saddening thing that we have lost all of her teachings. Like they mentioned there's 5 Marys in the Bible and they talk about how they think that they're all the same Mary, like they're the same Mary Magdalena, but that is just,
that's how a lot of, I just am reading the book When God Was a Woman, and they talk about how men have rewritten history, taking out the women, because women are naturally more intuitive, like, so they connect easier to the divine, and men started to see that as a threat. So they took down all the statues of priestesses. They burned all of the manuals and manuscripts that said anything about goddesses, and they made it masculine, and it's only God and everything's only God, and God's always a man. And it's just, but the good thing is, once we can still our brains, we can connect to the divine feminine, we can get that knowledge back. I don't believe that knowledge is lost. I feel like it was taken from the earth. And I think right now with the awakening of the divine feminine, I'm getting chills right now just saying this, like we get to reclaim that knowledge. We get to rechannel and redeliver and re-understand and teach that knowledge that has been lost, but it's really just been like, nope, not the right time. And now is the time for the divine feminine to come back. So I'm just really excited.
That's the same reason why they burn witches at the stake. Like men, the masculine is very analytical. They have to study. So men actually have to study and research and be schooled in a way of college to get their wisdom, where women, we just, like she said, we tap in and we are able to download that in such a way that was such a threatening thing that is why a lot of people were burned for witchcraft, because we were healers and we just knew, and that was very threatening to them.
We should do an episode just on witchcraft, witch hunts. Like if you guys don't know, there's like called Hammer of the Witches. It's a book. It was the second most published book after the Bible during, I believe, the 15 and 1600s.
And
they were just killing any
hundreds
woman.
Of thousands of women.
Like not hundreds of thousands. I think thousands.
It was quite a bit. It was like 100 of thousands in Europe.
In Europe, yes.
Not in America.
In London and England specifically. Scotland.
I thought it was more 80,000, but still a lot of women.
Well, anyways, thank you for tuning in. If you're tuning in, that means you're in discovery of your own spiritual awakening, or maybe you've already had your spiritual awakening. And we as divine feminine women would love to welcome you into the circle of the divine feminine. Trust yourself. Be patient. Remember, it is a journey, not a destination. And I have to remind myself that all the time because I'm super not patient. And I super don't trust myself sometimes. So I just want it to happen now. But then I just connect to the heart. The heart is the feminine energy. So the masculine energy is from your head to your heart. The feminine energy is from your womb to your heart. So whenever you feel like you just need to connect to that energy,
move your hips.
Just put your hands on your heart and your womb and get in your divine feminine. Dance a little naked in front of yourself. Make amazing, weird eye contact with yourself. It's awesome.
If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and check the description for freebies, our website, and more resources, along with once
Witch
COVID is
boxes.
over, we will be able to host in-person retreats where we will help you tap into your divine feminine.
Love you.
Yeah, we gotta get
We're on
started.
fire, girl.